Thank you very much. I wish to thank the organizers for inviting me, and I'll start off with what was announced in the conference blurb. Well, what else but a quotation from Frege? If someone wants to say today what he expressed yesterday using the word today, he will replace this word with yesterday, although the thought is the same, its verbal expression must be different in order that the change of sense which would otherwise be affected by the different types of utterance may be cancelled out. To which Perry, in his recent book, responds just to this passage. But should the thought be the same, the belief expressed by the midterm elections be today, on Tuesday, motivates responsible citizens to go to the polls. The belief expressed by the midterm election be yesterday on Wednesday will not motivate responsible voters to go to the polls. It seems the cognitive significance of the beliefs are different. And Perry, for simplicity, speaks a dialect of English that omits tense when there are temporal indexicals in the sentence. So notice this. He's speaking about cognitive significance of beliefs, whereas others are talking about cognitive significance of utterances, as we shall see shortly. For Perry, this is to say, cognitive significance lines up with the meanings of the indexicals. The meaning of yesterday informs one kind of cognitive significance, so to speak, and so does the meaning of today inform a different, well, in his terms, cognitive significance, bearer of cognitive significance, if you like. But David Kaplan once held a very similar view, but as early as in his demonstratives, he had doubts about the view that he expounded there. And in one place he said, it is not obvious what relation between today and yesterday must obtain in order to ensure the internal continuity that constitutes retaining the original belief. One of his worries is none other than the case of Rip Van Winkle that we have encountered a number of times in this conference, because if we take this to be achieved by replacing today with yesterday, claims Kaplan, Rip Van Winkle, who slept for 20 years, thinking he slept for only one day, cannot retain the belief he held before he went to sleep, such as the belief that he could express with today is a nice day, and this Kaplan finds very strange. We would need to deny that he had retained the original belief. Now, obviously, there are philosophers who are willing to deny that Rip had retained that belief, but Kaplan is not one of those. Hence, and there is a quotation from Kaplan that comes from much later, an idea of Donnellan, I think the paper is called. I may be tracking the passing days very carefully. I became acquainted with the day yesterday and expressed that way of being acquainted in my use of today. Assuming no recognition or tracking failures and no memory failures, I should be able to continue to have the day in mind in the same way today, though of course I will refer to it as yesterday. Here we see that the cognitive significance of an utterance, not belief, as in Perry, should not be identified with linguistic meaning. We need to leave linguistic meaning and turn to industrial strength ways of having in mind to give a proper analysis of the notions in this area. And now I wish to thank Mateusz for bringing this to me, that I should emphasize that for Kaplan, cognitive significance is, this is what he says in one short passage, what plays into understanding, reasoning, and the explanation of behavior. Now, the understanding business does not concern us here because it is an interpersonal matter. If we were to discuss the bear attack scenario or whatever, that would matter. But for what I'm going to talk about today, I'll ignore this first item. But as for reasoning and explanation of behavior, more of it later. Now, what Kaplan says is not very different from what Evans said in a passage that had been quoted a few times in this conference. The way of thinking of an object to which the general Fregean conception of sense directs us, in the case of dynamic Fregean thought, is a way of keeping track of an object. This permits us to say, after all, that a subject on day D2 is thinking of day D1 in the same way as on D1, despite lower level differences, because the thought episodes on the 2 days both depend upon the same exercise of a capacity to keep track of time. What Kaplan said is similar to this, but there is no evidence in Kaplan that he would embrace something like Evans's dynamic thoughts or exercising this capacity, though in the passage quoted, Kaplan mentions keeping track of time or of the days. So it is, I think, safe to say that for Kaplan and Evans, today and yesterday, these indexicals can convey the same cognitive significance in spite of being of different meaning types. Cognitive significance for Evans would consist in some kind of dynamic mode of presentation and or sense, which is for a Fregean such as Evans, a bearer of cognitive significance, whereas Kaplan spoke of those industrial strength ways of thinking of an object or having in mind. So this is to say that if they can convey both for Evans and Kaplan the same cognitive significance, even though they might differ in what they exactly mean by cognitive significance. One of them surely means dynamic Fregean sense. So in line with what plays into cognitive significance, and one of the items is reasoning, it would be irrational to wonder if these two expressions co-refer. That's what this reasoning business is supposed to be, that if you have no doubts about the days that you think of being the same, and in the world obliges, I mean, there are no mistakes about passing of midnight, then it would be irrational. I mean, it is irrational to wonder if they co-refer. Now, Perry takes the difference in meaning types of indexicals to bring about a difference in the cognitive significance of the beliefs. He says beliefs, Kaplan says utterances, by focusing on what one is motivated to do by adopting respectively, in the quoted passage, the midterm elections be today and the midterm elections be yesterday. And this is in line with the third item that Kaplan mentions in relation to cognitive significance. In line with the explanation of behavior, difference in cognitive significance motivates different behaviors. Now, since Perry holds that indexicality is essential in that it is a property of thoughts and not just of their linguistic expression, in being so motivated, one is into different psychological states. So Perry focuses on explanation of behavior, and Kaplan and Evans on reasoning. But what Perry just said, actually what I just said about Perry, if I have interpreted him correctly, it still leaves us with the question of what relation between indexical today and yesterday has to obtain in order to ensure the internal continuity that constitutes retaining the original belief. Kaplan's worry is still there. But still in the today-yesterday case, Perry does not use his own resources concerning belief retention that he readily uses in his examples about having a continued belief about encountered persons. In such cases, when he speaks about seeing a man in party and tracking him first through perception and then through memory, he appeals to a theoretical notion of a mental file in his 1980 paper, I think, The Problem of Continued Belief. And the internal identity that underlies the internal continued belief required for a certain mental file to represent a person as the same from one occasion to the next can be provided, claims Perry, by a cluster of predicates the subject has grouped together. And they do not need a singular term to be knitted together, or quantify a phrase such as some man, or an ersatz name such as a certain man will do, claims Perry. And he goes even further. A singular term like a context-sensitive definite description or an indexical or a proper name would do as well. And once a mental file has been created on the basis of encountering a certain person, he speaks of persons, it can be updated as perception gives way to memory. Hence the difference between the mental file so conceived and the persisting way of thinking or mode of presentation, depending how you cash out what Kaplan says, but for Evans that's the mode of presentation of a person, that this distinction seems to kind of disappear or becomes minimized. Because the identity of the state is thus unaffected, whether the mental file that one deploys relies on the perception or on the memory of the person that one is thinking about by way of deploying the same mental file. And when I say that a distinction disappears, it means that there is something that persists from the perceptual encounter to recalling this person in memory by way of simply using items that have the flavor of being the bearers of cognitive significance. To substantiate this, let's go further. The differences in the motivation to behave that respectively stem from being alive on Tuesday and remembering it on Wednesday, which for Perry inform different psychological states, in the case of persons, do not inform different psychological states. Well, at least he's not saying so. And when he speaks about recalling a person that he met at a party, he's not saying things such as when he speaks of midterm elections. And in a few places, Perry speaks of 8 information games, and I don't take this to lead him to claim that they inform 8 subsequent psychological states. They are just ways of updating the same file. Now, if we turn to the today-yesterday case and think of that along the similar lines, we have a means of ensuring the internal continuity that constitutes retaining the original belief. But this move seems to make its advocates accede to the opposite view that the belief expressed by the midterm elections be today, on Tuesday, is the same as the belief the midterm elections be yesterday on Wednesday. And if this is right, then we shift the classifiers of belief states and cognitive significance. Now, as noted, Perry claims that eternal identity that underlines the internal continued belief can be upheld by a context-sensitive definite description or an indexical. If this is right, then it seems to me that there is nothing to prevent the context-sensitive definite descriptions such as the present day and the previous day, or the indexicals today and yesterday, to whose linguistic meanings, that Perry once called roles, these descriptions amount, from being contained in the mental file. So the fact that as subject S keeps track of Tuesday from that day to Wednesday, S will first think of it as the present day, and then as the previous day, that is as today and yesterday, is in line with how Perry treats the update of a file, in that old entries are changed, new entries are made, which is once again in line with what Evans says about persisting Fregean senses. They belong to those, what did he call them, lower differences that in the persisting dynamic sense. And this then conforms or should conform to this part of cognitive significance for Kaplan, what plays into reasoning. But what about now the explanation of behavior? What about different self-locating properties that the subject deploys in thinking of Tuesday on Tuesday and on Wednesday? And in order not to quote myself, after my book came out, I have come across a similar view that Simon Prosser had articulated better than I was able to. And he says that he's talking about locations, and he says that if subject S first refers to location L by means of here, and then by there, as she moves from that location, what happens is that predicates is hereabouts and thereabouts are among the contents of the persisting mental file for location L, which is sometimes called a coarse-grained mode of presentation. Now, hereabouts and thereabouts are relations between the subject, who tracks the location, and the location L, on which the subject relies when, as a result of using the word here or there, in referring to location L, she believes that L is hereabouts or thereabouts. In taking this difference to be a difference in how the subject takes the world to be, and thus a difference in what S believes, it is this difference that explains the difference in the subject's behavior rather than the difference in the fine-grained mode of presentation that somebody was talking about, that we were talking about this morning, like on top of those coarse-grained ones, if you want to call them that, or else persisting files. Now, in the Sainsbury collection, Recanati grants to Prosser, towards the end of the paper, that a manifested belief, which is one that is manifested by the choice of indexical term, is typically part of the subject conception of the referent, whereby it is registered in the subject's mental file of the referent. Still, he thinks that the subject's self-ascribing of a hereabouts or a thereabouts relation is not primarily a belief, but a response that is subpersonally triggered, a response which normally but not necessarily gives rise to a belief. And in support of this, Recanati appeals to Evans, in that self-ascribing the relevant relation is not a belief, but a subpersonally triggered response that underlines a fine-grained mode of presentation that belongs to the personal level. And different fine-grained modes of presentation that correspond to thinking of a certain location in terms of here or there are, claims he, underpinned by the subpersonally triggered responses. And now, having said that, let's return to the yesterday-today case. And returning to the self-locating properties that the subject respectively deploys in thinking on Wednesday, or of Tuesday, on Tuesday and Wednesday, are they also a matter of appropriate subpersonally triggered responses This is my question for François. And then, before we come to that, I should mention that even though Evans speak about such responses when it comes to locations, these are of course no concern to Evans when he claims that keeping track of a certain day from one day to the next involves thinking of it via one and only persisting dynamic sense. And tracking or its cognates, I'm leaving this open if somebody wants to incorporate here ideas that come from semantic relationism. I'm not, this need not be strict. Tracking is understood here to be a personal matter rather than a subpersonal matter, and so are those beliefs that apparent some personal responses give to. I mean those beliefs that are a matter of persisting mental file that people can form as a matter of what a person can form as a matter of the predicates or properties that she has built into a file. What this points to is that the kind of tracking that we are talking about here is a personal thing. More than once I had a paper rejected because the referee claimed that this is not what tracking is. They have claimed that I'm using the wrong kind of tracking, that probably what they think is based on the vision theory, meaning that you can keep track of an object whilst believing that you are not, because your guru has told you that you are not a good tracker, which means that in that kind of case, tracking is, in that sense, not transparent. Now, if we grant these responses that we are talking about, subpersonal responses, the role that they are claimed to have in being subpersonal, they don't seem relevant in individuating personal mental state that tracking on time is couched in. If we are not going to use that subpersonal tracking that comes from the vision theory, of which is not epistemically transparent, then I don't know what encourages are. Somebody will obviously have a suggestion to rely on subpersonal items when it comes to these responses. It may as well make the theory lopsided, because on the one hand we are dealing with a personal level, the tracking is, as it is taken here to be, a matter of the personal level, whereas when it comes to these responses that are meant to inform finer grained mode of presentation, modes of presentation are something that belongs to the subpersonal level. Well, if this is right, then self-locating properties and the accompanying beliefs that are informed by what we incorporate into the files, that are manifested by the choice of the indexical term, belong with the contents of the persisting mental file of Tuesday without having any other role to play, or rather the role of informing finer grained modes of presentation. It is again a difference in what the subject believes about the world, as in the case of the locations, that explains the difference in her behavior. Now recall that in focusing on what the subject is motivated to do by adopting respectively the midterm elections be today and the midterm elections be yesterday, Perry holds that indexicality is essential in that it is a property of thoughts and not just of their linguistic expression. And in being so motivated, claims Perry, the subject is into different psychological states. Now, according to my proposal, we can say that indexicality is essential, but in a far looser sense because of the differences in subjects' manifested beliefs on Tuesday and Wednesday, and not because the subject is in two different indexical psychological states. Or at any rate, indexical beliefs, I mean, not to mention as the essential features, without speaking about essential indexicals, we can say that indexical beliefs are still special in that, unlike other beliefs, indexical manifested beliefs motivate different behaviors, even if the subject is attitudinally alike on Tuesday and Wednesday. For on both these days, the subject relies on the same relevant facts of the case, as well on the same set of desires for the situation to turn out, whether this is happening on Tuesday or on Wednesday. Thank you, Gregory.